Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open a seriously fascinating and honestly highly provocative text from way back in 1997. It's called The Sovereign Individual. Basically, it's a massive prophecy of the information age, looking at how technology might literally dismantle modern government as we know it. So, let's jump right in. Okay, let's dive into this. The authors hit us right out of the gate with this wild, almost apocalyptic hook. They write, "The state has grown used to treating its taxpayers as a farmer treats his cows. Soon, the cows will have wings." Their core argument here is that the internet is going to completely untether wealth from government taxation. Citizens will essentially just fly the coop. To unpack all this, we're going to follow a quick roadmap. We'll start with the fourth human stage, then look at megapolitics and violence, the rise of the sovereign individual, the end of nations, the Luddite backlash, and finally wrap up with a fragmented new world. Don't worry, we're going to objectively trace these super dense historical theories all the way from the fall of Rome straight into the futuristic cyber economy. Part 1. The fourth human stage, a sweeping revolution in human history. It really helps to ground ourselves in the source material for a second. This book was written in 1997. 1997, but it famously predicted the massive rise of decentralized digital economies, way before crypto or remote work were even a blip on the radar. The authors map out human society into 4 distinct stages. We've got prehistory, which was basically hunting and gathering. Millennia ago, we moved into agricultural societies. Then, from the 18th to the 20th century, we had industrial societies. And finally, the year 2000 and beyond marks the jump into information societies. Now here's the kicker. Unlike those older eras that took centuries or even millennia to play out, the authors argue that this whole transition into the information society is going to happen blazingly fast, like within a single lifetime. Moving into Section 2, Megapolitics and Violence, the Hidden Forces Shaping Society. Now, what's really interesting about this is their unique analytical framework. They rely heavily on a concept they call megapolitics. Basically, this is the study of hidden factors. We're talking technology, topography, climate, stuff that radically alters the costs and rewards of using violence. According to the text, a society's underlying structure isn't actually built on political manifestos or noble ideas. Instead, it's strictly dictated by the logic of violence, and ultimately, who can organize and wield that violence most efficiently. They use a really striking historical analogy to explain this. They compare the gunpowder revolution to the microprocessing revolution. Think about it. Gunpowder weapons completely downsized the medieval church and destroyed feudalism because they instantly made armored knights and huge stone castles totally obsolete, right? Well, they argue that microtechnology is going to do the exact same thing to the modern nation-state. It's going to destroy 20th century politics by making central physical control literally impossible. Section 3. The Sovereign Individual, the Rise of a New Cognitive Elite. So who actually benefits from this massive shift? Well, what happens when ideas become the greatest source of wealth? It's a huge question. Think about how a purely digital economy completely alters the traditional concept of physical capital. It flips the whole board. Let's look at the income disparity back in 1997. You had the top 15% of the world averaging about $21,000 a year, while the remaining 85% was making, on average, just $1,000. That is a massive, hoarded advantage for industrial nations. But the authors believe this is all bound to dissipate. Why? Because the information age is going to equalize global opportunity for the ambitious, completely regardless of where they happen to physically live. They envision this incredibly liberating new realm called the cyber economy. In cyberspace, merit is rewarded completely blindly. Race, age, physical ability, none of that matters. Ideas outrank physical capital every time. The top earners, who they call the cognitive elite, are going to operate totally outside traditional political borders. And here is the most controversial part. This wealth will be earned and compounded tax-free. People will compete globally on utterly equal, anonymous terms. Section 4. The End of Nations, the Desperate Reaction of the Dying State. So, the crucial point is, things are going to get messy. The text predicts that modern governments could see their taxing capacity plunge by a staggering 70%. That's their high-end estimate, sure, but still. As wealth seamlessly migrates over into untaxable cyberspace, the authors argue that the traditional nation-state is going to face imminent bankruptcy. They simply won't be able to fund themselves. And honestly, how does a starving state react? Not well. The authors project they'll act just like an angry farmer trying to trap his flying cows. They outline this extortion toolkit the state will supposedly use: arbitrary hostage-taking of citizens and their wealth, the covert sabotage of liberating tech, and just drastic runaway inflation of fiat money. It's a pretty dark scenario where desperate governments rely on extreme censorship and arbitrary forfeiture just to trap people and resources. Section 5. The Luddite Backlash. The nostalgic resistance to the information age. Obviously, this kind of shift is going to cause some serious societal unrest. To really get why people will resist this, you have to understand a concept the authors call moral anachronism. This is when you take moral strictures from one stage of economic life, like the 20th century industrial welfare state, and try to apply them to the vastly different circumstances of a new era. It completely explains why people who grew up in the 20th century are going to violently resist the information age on supposedly moral grounds. Their ethical framework is just totally outdated for the new megapolitical reality. They sum up this resentment with a hilariously blunt quote. They say to think of it as a bald desire fitted with a moral toupee. Basically, the authors are saying a lot of this backlash won't actually be genuine moral outrage. It's just going to be the bitter resentment of people who are losing their unearned, hoarded advantages in a completely ruthless new meritocracy. Section 6. A Fragmented New World. The Return of Overlapping Sovereignties. Let's move to and see how this builds into their ultimate vision of the 21st century. Look at the stark contrast they draw here. On one side, you have the industrial-era citizen, who the authors brutally describe as just a de facto asset on a treasury's balance sheet, subject to mass coercion. On the other side, you have the information-age customer. This is a truly sovereign individual who treats jurisdictions like competing service providers. You're negotiating terms, not just blindly obeying edicts. So according to the text, the future is actually going to look a lot more like the Middle Ages than the 20th century. It's a neo-medieval future. They predict we'll see merchant republics forming in cyberspace. We'll see the rise of powerful underground mafias and renegade agencies stepping in as microparasites to fill the power void. And we'll see overlapping march regions with fuzzy, poorly defined borders. Basically, power is going to fragment into totally private enclaves. And this brilliantly illustrates their broader historical theory, the 500-year cycle of Western civilization. Look at the math here. 500 BC, we get Greek democracy. 490 AD, the fall of Rome and the Dark Ages. 1000 AD is the feudal revolution. 1492 AD brings the gunpowder revolution. Following that exact mathematical pattern, the year 2000 perfectly aligns with the information revolution. They firmly believe these massive ruptures are mathematically preordained by historical cycles. Now, before we wrap up, it's really worth pointing out why we're even analyzing this today, their pre-1997 track record. Using this exact megapolitical framework, the authors actually correctly forecast the October 1987 stock market crash. They predicted the total collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. They even called the long-term drop in blue-collar wages. And they did all of this while conventional experts were literally laughing at them. So their framework definitely demands some attention. Which leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative question. As cyberspace continues to grow, are we witnessing the inevitable end of the nation-state or just its next violent evolution? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really encourage you to ponder how the logic of violence and these massive technological shifts are operating in your own digital lives right now. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.